Rian sat on the floor of his cell, hands locked in energy cuffs, outside the force bars. Alien guards talked and laughed. To them, he was only another human prisoner above the burning world. "This one is special," one guard said, tapping the field. "The last human dragon speaker," the other answered. "The Emperor will break him like he broke the rest." Ryan kept his head bent. Dark hair hid his eyes. He let them think he was weak and empty. A deep voice moved through his thoughts like distant thunder. "Rian," the voice rumbled. "You are quiet again, little human." "I'm listening, Storm," Rian answered in his head. "I do not want them to hear. The guards cannot hear me," Storm said. "They only hear their own pride far below." Storm lay in a heavy cage on the lowest deck, chains cut into his wings, and a metal collar burned his neck. He was huge. But the Empire thought steel could hold him. "Where are they taking us?" Rian asked. "To the Empire capital," Storm said. "They want your gift. They will try to turn you into their tool." On another level of the ship, a quiet room held a single stasis pod. Glowing blue in the dark, two officers walked past the glass. "Princess Lyra," one said, the exiled one. "Why keep a traitor alive?" the other asked. "So the nobles remember what happens to those who say no to the Emperor," the first replied. And they moved on. Rian's arms ached, but he refused to ask for help. "Storm," he thought. "Are you still awake?" "Always," the dragon replied. "I feel the engines. They shake too much. Something is wrong." A tremor ran through the walls. Then a stronger one. "That is not normal," Rian said. "No," Storm growled. "That is not drift, that is attack." An alarm screamed to life. Red lights flashed along the hall. "Battle stations!" a voice shouted. "Human rebel ships in range." The guards cursed and grabbed their weapons. Outside, small human fighters darted toward the prison ship. Their shots cut into its armor. The deck jumped under Rian. Dust fell from the ceiling. A small smile touched his face. "Humans are still out there," he told Storm. "We are not finished." "Do not waste this chance," Storm said. "When the power dips, I will break my lock. You must find me." Another blast struck. The lights flickered. The field around Rian's cuffs weakened for a breath. He pulled hard, feeling them slip, but they did not break. The guards shouted into their comm units, but heard only static. The cell door slid open with a hiss. A tall officer stepped in, his armor black and red, a long cloak on his shoulders. He raised a bright blaster and aimed at Rian's head. "The Emperor wants your voice," he said. "You will speak for him, or you will scream for him." He opened his mouth to answer, but a huge explosion shook the ship. The floor lurched, the officer stumbled. His aim thrown wide, far below. The shock slammed into Storm's cage. The power field around his lock flickered and dropped. Now, Storm thought. He drew in a deep breath and sent a narrow stream of white fire at the lock. Metal flared, then cracked. Chains fell from his wings. Storm roared. His free voice rolled through every deck. In the pod room, the lights flickered, then died for a second. Cold air rushed in. Lyra's eyes flew open. She pressed her hand to the glass. Gasping, the dragon's roar reached her. "A dragon," she whispered. Dragons on Empire ships never roared like that. Another blast ripped through the ship. The floor under Ryan and the officer split with a loud crack. The blaster slid away across the tilting floor. Ryan threw himself forward, cuffs and all, and slammed his shoulder into the officer's legs. The roar came again inside Rian's bones. "Storm," he thought, fighting for breath. "I am free." The dragon answered. "I feel the lower decks. Find a way down. I will burn a path, high above the dragon deck." The frame that held Lyra's pod shook loose. The support snapped, and the pod slid off the metal arms into an open shaft. Lyra screamed as it dropped on the dragon deck. Storm raised his head toward the sound. He saw the falling pod and felt a new mind brush his own. "Who is that?" he growled. In his broken cell, Ryan felt it too. Another presence at the edge of his thoughts. The pod rushed down toward the dragon. The officer reached for his lost blaster, and Rian tried to stand on the cracked floor. Caught between death, a princess, and the roar of his only friend, Storm tore the last broken chain from his wing and shook metal from his scales. Smoke crawled along the dragon deck. Alarms cried like angry birds. The prison ship was still flying, but it felt like a dying beast, rolling in the dark, far above. Ryan lay on the cracked floor where part of his cell had fallen away. The officer groaned beside him, reaching for the blaster that slid between broken tiles. Ryan threw his body forward, cuffs biting into his wrists. His fingers closed on the cold weapon. He rolled. In the officer's hand hit empty air. "Stop!" the officer shouted, grabbing Ryan's ankle. Ryan kicked with both feet, wild and hard. The man lost his grip as the ship rolled again. Ryan pointed the blaster with his bound hands. Heart beating too fast, he had never used alien guns. But he had seen what they did. He thought of flames on human streets and of his sister's small hand. He pulled the trigger. A bolt of white light slammed into the officer's chest. Armor sparked. The man was thrown back into the corridor and did not move again. Ryan stared for a breath, his throat tight. He wanted to be sick. But there was no time for that. "Move, little human." Storm's voice hit his mind like a hammer. "More soldiers are coming, and I am still alone down here." Ryan ran into the corridor. The deck bent under his boots. Sirens wailed! The air smelled of smoke and burned wiring. He needed a way down, to the lowest deck, to the dragon hangar. He saw a service hatch with a ladder and threw himself through it. The cuffs made it hard to climb, but he kept going, one step at a time. At the same time, the stasis pod holding Lyra fell. Metal rails screamed as the capsule tore past level after level. Inside, Lyra's body slammed against the harness. Her breath crushed out of her lungs. Her vision full of sharp lights and flashes of decks. The status screen over her head showed red symbols. But the power failed too fast to give clear words. "This is how I die." She thought, not in a court, not on a stage, just as falling trash in my father's ship. The shaft opened into the dragon deck like a dark mouth. Storm looked up as the pod dropped toward him. He had heard the faint mind inside, bright and afraid. He could let it hit the floor and break. One less Imperial, one less cursed blood. He almost did. For a single bitter heartbeat, then he remembered other cages. Other cries. He roared and sprang forward. Chains dragging behind him. His wings snapped open just enough to guide his jump. His back rose under the falling pod like a living ramp. The stasis capsule hit his shoulders instead of the steel floor. Pain burst along his spine where metal had cut his scales for years. He dug his claws into the deck and held, growling deep. The pod slid down between his wings and crashed into a stack of cargo crates. They toppled, but the capsule did not shatter. It just cracked and hissed. Inside, Lyra's head rang. She sucked in thin air and opened her eyes. Instead of smooth white walls, she saw black scales and burning light. A huge golden eye stared back at her through the broken glass. "Calm and furious at the same time, a free dragon," she whispered. Her voice too soft for anyone to hear. Not a chained court beast. Not drugged, not silent, truly free. Storm sniffed the air coming from the pod. He smelled fear, metal, and royal blood, princess, he thought with disgust. Of all things to fall into my claws, it had to be a star child of the Emperor. Lyra could not hear the words, but she heard the deep growl. Her people had kept dragons as weapons for generations. She had seen them in chains, eyes dull, wings folded like dead flags. This one was different. All fire and hate and painful pride. Another blast shook the ship. The dragon deck doors burst open, and a squad of armored guards rushed in. They saw Storm loose and the cracked pod near his claws. "Target the dragon!" their leader shouted. "Forget the cargo! Kill it!" Blaster fire filled the air with sharp white lines. Storm flinched as shots hit his shoulders and side, burning hot. He answered with fire. A narrow spear of white flame that smashed into the ceiling. Metal melted and rained down like glowing rain. Sealing doors, drowning the dragon deck in steam and sparks. In that burning storm, every choice tightened, and every path began to point toward one impossible alliance ahead. Smoke wrapped the dragon deck in a heavy grey blanket. Storm stood in the center, wings half open. Chains still on his claws, blaster bolts cut bright lines through the fog. But the guards could not see clearly. He listened instead of looking, counting footsteps, smelling fear and metal and burning plastic. Another scent moved under the smoke, sharp and strange. Royal blood, he thought, cold anger rising. The Emperor's line is here. The cracked pod lay between fallen crates. Its glass broken but not gone. Inside, Lyra pushed at the seal, coughing as hot air poured in. Her fingers slipped on melted plastic, her heart hammered in her chest. She heard the dragon roar, raw and free. Not the dull sound of a chained court beast on an upper level. Ryan dropped from a ladder onto a narrow steel bridge. The floor shook under his boots, and red light flashed through rising steam. He gripped the rail with his cuffed hands and forced himself to look down. Shapes moved in the smoke, huge and dark, with sparks bursting around them. "Storm," he called in his mind. "Where are you?" The answer came like thunder, below you to your left, little human. "You are standing over my head." Ryan gave a shaky smile, even now. "Glad someone knows where I am," he thought back. He started along the bridge, feet slipping, using the wall and rail to stay up, on the deck below. The guards had changed their plan. "Stop wasting shots," one shouted. "Prepare gas on dragon level. Seal vents to upper decks." Lyra heard him and froze, her skin turning cold. Gas, she thought. They will kill all of us and call it order. She slammed both hands against the latch. Teeth gritted. With a loud crack, the seal gave way. The glass swung open. She stumbled out onto the crate. Legs weak, coughing hard. The air tasted of smoke and melted wire. Thick and sharp and real, Storm turned his head toward her. In one golden eye, bright through the fog. Princess, he guessed by smell and bearing. A star child of the throne, he could crush her in one step. In one tiny branch of the line that had chained his kind. Instead he watched, puzzled that she crawled toward cover instead of calling guards to save her. Ryan reached a service panel at the bridge end and dropped to his knees. The cover plate was fixed with 4 smooth bolts, no handhold. He hooked the chain of his cuffs under the edge and leaned back with all his weight. Metal bent, screeched, then tore loose. A burst of sparks blowing into his face. He coughed and blinked, eyes burning, searching the tangle of strips and lights. He could not read the alien script, but he knew colors and symbols. Orange for heat, blue for air, green for movement. One narrow strip pulsed sickly yellow, marked with the same sign painted near the vents. That must be gas, he thought. He wrapped the chain around it and pulled. The strip snapped free, lights died across the panel, below. Small vents that had been sliding open slammed shut again with a hollow clang. On the floor, a guard stared at his gas control unit as the screen went dark. "What now?" he shouted, slamming it with his hand. "It was ready!" It was ready. Storm felt the faint sting in the air fade. For a brief instant he was shocked. The tiny human had just saved his life. Maybe humans are not only prey, he thought. And the idea tasted strange. Lyra tried to stand and almost slipped on the sloping deck. A shot hit near her, throwing sparks across the floor. She dropped behind a crate, heart pounding. "By the crate," a guard called, weapon raised. "Show your hands!" Now his armor bore her father's crest. Bright even in the smoke, old habit told her to obey. To trust the royal mark, old memory stopped her. The colony she refused to burn. The children she hid in cargo holds. She stayed low and did not lift her hands. The guard stepped closer. "Princess Lyra," he said. "We will secure you on a safe deck, but the dragon must die." Behind him, Storm shifted, heat rolling from his scales. He understood the word princess, understood the tone that made the dragon a thing. Not a person, flame welled in his throat. But the angle was wrong. The girl would burn with the soldier. A voice echoed through the deck. Cruel. "Warning, dragon hanger compromised." "Jettison in 60 now," it said. The floor shook under Storm's claws, under the princess's hands. Under every broken chain the Empire had chosen, they would throw dragon and traitor into the dark together. The warning voice rolled through the torn ship. "Calm and cold, dragon hanger jettison in 60 seconds. Storm felt the floor under his claws begin to tremble. When the count reached 0, the box would fall into space. High on the broken bridge, Ryan heard the same words. The sound cut through smoke and pain and fear. If they dropped the hanger, he thought, "Storm is gone. That girl is gone. Every mine down there is gone." His ribs screamed with each breath. His wrists burned inside the cuffs. He ran, boots slipping on tilted metal, forcing his legs to move faster down below. The last squad of guards shouted into silent comm units. "Gas failed, vents sealed, dragon is still loose," one yelled. Then the safety picked up our mess, another answered. "The system will jettison this level, pull back." Lyra heard them leaving. Heard the fear and the obedience in their voices. So this is how he rules, she thought. If a piece of his world becomes untidy, he slices it off and lets it die. Her chest plate was cracked. Every breath stabbed like a knife. Still, she pushed herself to her feet beside the toppled stasis pod. Her eyes went to the dragon, not to the closing doors. She could not fight a whole empire, but she could choose which side of its knife she stood on. Storm saw her shape through the smoke. Small and bright and wrong in this place of chains, princess, he thought with bitter flame. Dragon hanger jettison in 50 seconds, the voice said. His wing joints ached where iron had cut them. His collar burned his neck. The Empire had turned dragons into weapons and trophies. Now it planned to throw a free one away like trash. Rian reached the end of the bridge and finally saw the full hangar below. Storm stood in the center of broken crates and bodies, wings half spread, chains hanging like dead vines. Near his claws, he saw the alien girl from the pod, armor cracked, hair stuck to her face. Between them and the far wall, there was only smoke and falling sparks. Storm, Ryan called in his mind. Look up. The dragon raised his head, golden eye finding the small human above. You are late, little human, Storm answered. They are about to cut us free and let us fall. Then we choose where we fall, Ryan thought, pulse hammering. Is there a shuttle in that hangar? Any craft still docked, Storm turned his head, scanning through haze and fire. At the far edge of the deck, he saw a small shuttle, locked in clamps. Yes, he said, but it is bound with metal and codes. I can break metal, Ryan replied, and maybe she can break codes. He did not know if the princess would help a human or a dragon. He jumped from the bridge, he hit the lower deck and rolled. Pain exploding up his side, Lyra spun at the sound. Pain's lifting by habit for a weapon she no longer had. For a breath, she thought another guard had fallen in. Then she saw his face, human, young, eyes bright with stubborn fire. Dragon speaker, she whispered. The old forbidden word. Ryan forced his legs to hold him. Storm, cover us, he said inside his skull. Out loud he spoke to Lyra. There is a shuttle on this deck. Can you open it? She stared at him, shocked that he spoke to the dragon as if to a friend. Dragon hangar jettison in 40 seconds. The ship voice said. Calm as ever. Yes, she said at last, voice rough. Yes, I can try. She ran toward the far wall. Limping but fast, Rian followed, cuffs clinking with each step. Lungs burning. Storm moved with them, his huge body a living shield. He spat narrow streams of fire at cameras and half-alive guns. They reached the shuttle. Thick alloy arms held it tight to the floor. A control pillar stood beside the nose. Covered in glowing runes, Lyra slapped her hand on the pad. Symbols flashed, state name and rank, a flat voice said. Lyra Varin, she answered. Rank, exiled princess, third line. Exile status confirmed, the pillar replied. Limited override granted, local clamps only. Do it, Lyra said. Heavy locks hissed and drew back from the shuttle hull. Under their feet, the deck gave a hard shudder. Dragon hangar jettison in 20 seconds. Ryan dragged the hatch open with both bound hands. He stumbled inside and fell into a narrow chair. Lyra slid into the pilot seat, fingers moving over cold switches. Storm lowered his head beside the hull, one bright eye level with the open hatch. What now, little human, he asked. Now you hold on, Ryan said, and do not let us drift away when they cut this floor loose. 10 seconds, the voice said. External locks disengaging. Along the edge of the glowing red lines, shaped charges fired in a sharp chain. Metal screamed as the hangar deck split from the rest of the ship. The whole floor lurched and dropped, Storm roared, wings snapping wide. Claws biting hard into the breaking surface. He hooked his talons around the shuttle frame as the dragon hangar tore free and tumbled into the black. Storm felt the world tip away under his claws. The broken hangar fell through the dark, spinning slow and heavy. Metal screamed around him like a torn animal. Inside the shuttle, panels flashed red. Lyra gripped the controls so hard her hands hurt. Her training was for calm routes and guard ships, not a falling grave. The floor bucked under her feet. The window showed only twisting steel. Ryan slammed against his harness. Cuffs cutting his skin. He could not reach the panels. He could only hold on and shout over the alarm. Storm, hold us straight! If we turn too far, we break! Storm dug his claws deeper into the torn deck and around the shuttle frame. Wings spread. He fought the spin like he fought chains. Old wounds burned, but he did not let go behind them. The prison ship shrank as it burned. Human rebel fighters circled it like angry sparks. Some went dark, some tore guns from its hull. For a moment, no one watched the falling hangar. It was just trash in the fire. Lyra saw a clear path open ahead. A window of black, between turning slabs of metal. She used it, firing the shuttle engines on full. The ship jumped forward, dragging against the deck under Storm's claws. For one wild second, he thought his grip would tear free. Then the floor slid away from the hull with a final shriek. The hangar tumbled off alone. Storm clung to the shuttle like a living shield. They burst from the shadow of the wreck. Stars opened around them, sharp and endless. Enemy scanners caught them at once. New red marks flashed on Lyra's screen. "Prison shuttle," a cold voice snapped over open comm. "Disable engines, do not destroy." Emperor's asset on board. Rian heard it and felt his blood go cold. He knew who the asset was, the last human dragon speaker. They will chase us forever, he thought. Unless we go where they fear to follow. "Storm," he called in his mind. "Where can we go?" The dragon stayed quiet for a long heartbeat. Then a deep memory stirred, a dark ring at the edge of space. "There is a belt," he said slowly, "a dead road of rock and old bones. Your kind once named it the Grave Road. The Empire watches its edge, but will not go inside." Lyra looked at the burning prison ship and at the hunters closing in. She did not like the idea of flying into a ghost belt guided by a dragon and a human traitor, but the choice was simple, chains or unknown. "Give me the coordinates," she said. Storm sent the place into Ryan's mind. Numbers flowed like a cold river. Ryan repeated them, slow and clear. Lyra entered them into the drive. Enemy fire brushed their wake, shaking the hull. "Ready for jump," she said. "Hold on to something." "Or someone." Rian shut his eyes. Storm folded his wings tighter around the hull. The stars stretched into thin lines. Then snapped. Silence came. Alarms faded to a low hum. Lights shifted from red to blue. Ryan opened his eyes to a window full of thick dark. Dust and shadow turned slowly. They had reached the dead belt. Broken moons drifted like blind giants. Between them floated shapes that were not rock. Long curves of bone, rings of fused metal, shards of old armor. Ryan felt a soft pressure at the back of his mind. Voices, not words, like a choir behind a wall. "Dragons," Storm said, his own voice quiet. "These are our dead." And those who never slept. Lyra stared at the bones outside. Each larger than the shuttle, she had seen dragons in chains. Heads bowed, wings folded small. She had never seen them stretched across the dark like fallen bridges. Her throat felt tight. She did not know if it was fear or shame. A small light blinked on her board. Ryan saw it too, a tiny red spark at the corner. "What is that?" he asked. "Tracker Echo," she said. "One hunter must have marked us before we jumped." Ryan's chest tightened. "So we are not safe," he thought. "Not even here, Storm. Can you feel anything hunting us?" "Not yet," the dragon answered. "But the belt is full of blind corners. We must go deeper, where their machines go blind." Lyra cut the main lights and lowered power. The shuttle drifted forward, a small shadow among greater ones. Storm stayed wrapped around the hull, eyes open. They passed under the curve of a giant rib. And Ryan felt the voices grow stronger. They were not clear, but they were waiting far ahead. In the heart of the dead belt. Something old had noticed the last human dragon speaker arrive. Storm stayed wrapped tight around the shuttle hull as it drifted deeper into the dead belt. Cold dust slid over his scales like ghost fingers. Broken moons and long ribs of dragon bone turned slowly around them, silent and heavy. Inside the shuttle, the lights were low and soft. Lyra had shut down every extra system she could, trying to hide their heat. Ryan sat in his seat with the straps across his chest, but his eyes were half closed. His mind was not in the shuttle. It was outside. Soft pressure pushed at him from the dark. Not words, just feelings. Curiosity, sorrow, old anger. And something like a tired hope. "You hear them more clearly now." "Little human," Storm said in his mind. Rian swallowed and answered, "Yes, I do. They know I am here." "One of them knows you more than the others," Storm went on. "Older than any throne. Older than the first chain on a dragon neck, far away, at the edge of the belt." A black Imperial hunter ship floated like a sharp tooth in the dark. On its bridge, a captain watched the screen with tight eyes. "The tracker Echo jumped to these coordinates," his tech officer said. "After that, the belt scrambles everything." The captain looked at the red blur on the display and thought of the Emperor's voice. "Then we go in as far as we must," he replied. "Or we die for failing." Lyra did not see that ship, but she felt time closing on them. "We cannot drift in a straight line," she said. fingers ready on the controls. If we drift, they can guess our path and cut us off. Then we do not drift, Storm said from outside. We follow. Follow what? Ryan asked. Storm turned his great head, eyes fixed on something in the dark that only he could feel. A call, he said slowly, something deep. Something that still remembers our true names. The shuttle slipped between two broken moons and into the shadow of a huge ring. At first, it looked like just another dead rock. Then the angle changed, and Ryan saw the truth. It was not stone. It was a ring of old metal fused with bone and dust, wide enough for Storm to fly through with wings spread. At its center burned a faint blue glow, steady and patient. Lyra's hands tightened on the controls. That is not debris, she said, voice low. Ryan felt the pressure in his head grow stronger. The many small voices pulled back, and one great presence stepped forward. It felt like a mountain leaning down to look at him. Come in, it said without sound, a feeling like open doors and waiting fire. Do you trust this? Lyra asked, looking from the ring to Ryan. No, Storm answered at once. But I know it. He tasted old fear on his tongue. This is an ancient gate, built when humans and dragons flew together. Ryan stared through the glass at the blue glow, heart beating too fast. So there were more like me, he said, small in the dim cabin. Once, Storm replied, and when your kind fell, this place woke no more. The shuttle crossed the ring. For a breath, the stars vanished. Blue light wrapped them like water, thick and bright. Then it softened and pulled back. They were floating in a hollow space as big as a city. Curved walls rose around them, cut with faint lines and shapes. Dragons curved along the metal, wings wide, no chains on their necks. Humans stood with hands on dragon muzzles, heads bowed in respect, not fear. In front of the cockpit window, a figure made of light appeared. It looked almost human, thin and old with bright hard eyes. Lyra flinched. One hand going to a weapon she no longer had, Ryan only stared. Too tired and too full of voices to be afraid. Welcome, the figure said, its voice inside the cabin without any speaker. Last human dragon speaker, exiled daughter of the throne. Free dragon called Storm. Lyra's throat went dry when she heard her own crime named so easily. What are you? She asked. I am the keeper of this sanctuary, it said, an echo of minds that refused to kneel. Storm bared his teeth, smoke curling from his nose. The chains came anyway, he growled, thinking of collars and burning metal. The keeper inclined its head, almost like a bow to another king. Yes, it said, because no dragon speaker lived to stand here when the choice was made. Ryan leaned forward until the straps bit his shoulders. What choice? He asked. The keeper raised one hand and the walls brightened. Images slid across the metal like light on water. Humans and dragons and other shapes fought side by side against black ships that looked like knives. Then the same dragons bowed under a crowned figure, holding a long spear of starfire. The choice to sleep, the keeper said, or to surrender. Ryan watched soldiers and dragons fall, watched the sky burn in silent pictures. In sleep, we hid the ancient heart. The first great dragon mind, the keeper went on, in surrender. Your emperor's line forged the star lance and fed it dragon flame. Lyra shook her head, armor plates scraping the seat. The star lance is only a weapon, she said, breath quick. That is what we were taught. The keeper's bright eyes turned to Lyra, light sharp around its face. The star lance is not only a weapon, it said. It is a chain. It drinks dragonfire, and through that pain your emperor speaks into every forced bond. Lyra felt sick, remembering clean lesson maps with no blood and no screams. Storm's claws scraped the hull outside, a slow, angry sound in the still air. I killed because they burned my mind, he said in thought. Not because I chose their wars. Back in the hollow, the keeper pointed at the floor. Metal opened like a steel flower, showing a deep, round shaft. At its center floated a dim red sphere, pulsing like a slow heart. The ancient heart waits, the keeper said. It has slept since the last dragon speaker died. If you wake it, it will reach for every dragon mind that still remembers freedom. If you fail, it will close on you and grind you into dust between stars. Lyra turned to Ryan, fear and anger mixed on her tired face. You do not have to do this, she said. You are one human. The galaxy will not change for you. Ryan thought of prison decks and burning streets, of Storm roaring when chains broke, of human fighters dying in white flashes around cold ships. He also saw smaller things, warm bread in his hands, his sister laughing in a leaking room, strangers sharing when they had almost nothing. "If no one stands up—" "Nothing changes," he answered. "If I die, at least I die pushing back." Storm's mind pressed around his like a wall. "Walk in," the dragon said. "I will stand with you." Little human. Heat rose from the shaft, like breath from a sleeping beast. Ryan climbed down a narrow ladder into the red glow, each step making dragon whispers louder in his head. At the bottom, the ancient heart floated above the floor, a ball of turning light and shadow. Ryan stood before it, hands still bound, legs weak. "I am Ryan," he said with his voice and his mind. "I am human, I am small. But I will not be your chain," the heart flared. He saw humans kneel and humans fight, humans betray and humans protect. All the dragon voices twisted into one heavy thought. "Why should we trust your kind again?" it asked. "Your blood broke, your oaths failed. You left us to collars." Ryan wanted to fall, but he stayed standing. "You remember the ones who broke," he said. "Remember the ones who stood too?" He showed the heart small scenes. His mother pulling him from a burning square, his father fixing a cracked toy dragon, his sister hiding food for another scared child. "You call us weak," he said, "but we keep standing back up, even when it hurts. That is all I have, but I will give it until nothing is left, above." Red light crawled through old lines in the metal walls. "He is going to die," Lyra whispered. Storm shook his head, though fear twisted his own thoughts. "Or he will become something your emperor cannot chain," the dragon replied. The ancient heart trembled, its surface folding in and out like breath. It tasted Ryan's stubborn hope, his anger at cages, his simple love for small lives. At last the great voice said, softer now but huge, "Then stand with us!" The sphere burst outward in a ring of red light that passed through Ryan and into the walls. He cried out as the world widened, not from pain but from weight. Suddenly he could hear far more. Dragons in distant holds stirring, confused. Dragons on war stations lifting their heads. Dragons in deep caves opening one bright eye. On the edge of the dead belt, a hunter ship slid between broken rocks. The captain opened his mouth to order a scan, then froze. Every dragon shard wired into his hull screamed at once, then went empty and cold. His crew stared at boards full of wild signs dropping flat. "Report," he shouted. "Sir, the net is gone," his tech said. Something broke it from inside. Ryan climbed back up the ladder, movements slow, skin pale, eyes bright. Lyra saw his face and knew that something in him had changed shape. His gaze seemed to look through the walls, far and then near. "I can hear them," he said. Voice unsteady, "So many they are afraid. But they are waking." The keeper bowed its light-made head. "The war truly begins now," it said. "Your emperor will feel this break and move his world ship." Lyra straightened, pain burning in her ribs, but her voice steady. "Then we cannot hide," she said. "We must choose our ground before he chooses it for us." Ryan turned toward the shadow of Storm's great head outside the hull. "Can we call dragons here?" he asked. "They make this dead belt our first shield." Storm's teeth showed in something like a hard smile. Outside the stars waited, silent. "Yes," he said. "Call them, little human. And let the galaxy remember what it means when humans stand with dragons."